Marcus Thorne believed that money bought him the right to be cruel. As a billionaire real estate mogul, he thought he was the smartest man in the room, especially when he leaned back in his chair at the exclusive Oasis lounge and said in flawless Arabic, "هذه النادلة إنها مجرد ظل لا قيمة لها." This waitress, she's just a shadow, worthless. His business partners laughed as he continued mocking Zainab, the quiet server refilling his water glass. انظروا إليها فارغة تماما مثل الأثاث. Look at her, as empty as the furniture, he added with a smirk, certain she couldn't understand a word. But Marcus made a fatal mistake, because while he was destroying her character in a language he thought was his secret weapon, he was also confessing to a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, unaware that Zainab was a former intelligence analyst who spoke 7 languages fluently. When she finally responded in perfect Arabic, "سيد ثورن, أنا أفهم كل كلمة قلتها وكل جريمة اعترفت بها." Mr. Thorne, I understand every word you said and every crime you confessed. His face went white as snow. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or where you work? This story will show you how one woman's patience brought an arrogant billionaire to his knees. Comment below where you're watching from, and hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of justice. The Oasis Lounge wasn't just expensive, it was exclusive. Nestled on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the city, it was where power brokers made deals that shaped economies. Marcus Thorne swept through the entrance at exactly 7 p.m., his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble with the rhythm of entitlement. His assistant scurried behind him, phone pressed to her ear, confirming tomorrow's meetings while Marcus didn't even acknowledge her presence. The maitre d' recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Marcus Thorne's face had graced the covers of financial magazines, his net worth climbing past the billion-dollar mark before he turned 40. Real estate was his kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in designer suits. "Mr. Thorne, your usual table," the maitre d' said smoothly, gesturing toward the private corner booth. Marcus didn't respond. He simply walked past as if the greeting had been his due, not a courtesy. His eyes scanned the room with the detached assessment of someone evaluating property, not people. He noticed the crystal chandeliers, the imported orchids on each table, the carefully curated ambiance that justified the $500 per person minimum. What he didn't notice, what he never noticed, were the servers moving like shadows between tables. Zainab watched him from across the room, her expression neutral as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes. She'd seen men like Marcus before, powerful, arrogant, certain that the world existed to serve them. Little did he know, he was about to make the most expensive mistake of his life. To everyone at the Oasis Lounge, Zainab was simply the quiet waitress who worked the evening shift. She arrived on time, performed her duties flawlessly, and left without drawing attention. Her manager appreciated her reliability, her co-workers respected her work ethic, but knew almost nothing about her life outside these walls. They didn't know that 5 years ago, Zainab had been someone entirely different. In Baghdad, she had been a senior intelligence analyst, fluent in 7 languages, specializing in financial crimes and international corruption. She had worked with elite units, tracking money laundering operations that stretched across 3 continents. Her mind was a weapon, sharp and precise, trained to detect patterns that others missed. But when her work exposed the wrong people, powerful politicians with dangerous connections, Zainab's life had shattered overnight. The threats came first, then the attempts on her life. She'd fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and her sister's hand in hers, seeking political asylum in a country where her credentials meant nothing without years of recertification. So she waitressed, not because it was all she could do, but because it was what allowed her to survive while she rebuilt. The Oasis Lounge paid well enough to support her sister through university. The work was honest, and Zainab had learned long ago that dignity wasn't determined by job titles. She adjusted her uniform and picked up the wine list, heading toward table 5 where Marcus Thorne was now seated with 3 other men. She had no idea this evening would change everything. Marcus's guests arrived within minutes, 2 Saudi investors, and a Lebanese banker. The introductions were cordial, professional. Marcus had worked with Middle Eastern investors before. They had the kind of capital that could transform skylines. He'd learned to pepper his conversations with Arabic phrases, enough to seem respectful and cultured. Zainab approached the table with quiet efficiency. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I start you with beverages?" Marcus barely glanced at her. "Champagne, the Krug. Bring the bottle." "Of course." Zainab's voice was soft, accented with the Middle East, but deliberately neutral. As she turned to leave, Marcus leaned toward his guests and said in Arabic, "هؤلاء الخدم هنا مثل الآثاث زينة ولكن فارغة تماما من الداخل." These servers here are like furniture, decorative but utterly empty inside. He smiled as he said it, his Arabic smooth but clearly meant to impress rather than communicate. The Saudi investors exchanged glances but said nothing. The Lebanese banker, Mr. Khalil, shifted uncomfortably. Zainab's hand tightened imperceptibly on her notepad, but her face remained serene. She'd heard worse. The dialect Marcus used was actually one she knew intimately. She'd worked in Lebanon for 2 years during a critical operation. She returned with the champagne, pouring it with practiced grace. Marcus continued his conversation in English, discussing property values and market projections. But every few minutes he'd slip into Arabic, each time with a subtle insult. لاحظوا كيف لا تتفاعل حتى غافلة تماما. "Notice how she doesn't even react? Completely oblivious," he said with a patronizing smile. Zainab served in silence, becoming exactly what he thought she was, invisible. The dinner progressed through multiple courses. Marcus was in his element, commanding the conversation, impressing his guests with insider knowledge and bold projections. The investors seemed genuinely interested in his latest venture, a massive resort development in Dubai that promised unprecedented returns. After the 3rd glass of champagne, Marcus's tongue loosened. He switched to Arabic more frequently now, using it as a private language to share comments he'd never say in English where other diners might overhear. هذه الصفقة مبنية على أرقام ستجعل رؤوس المنظمين الأمريكيين تدور. This deal is built on numbers that would make these American regulators' heads spin, he said in Arabic, leaning forward conspiratorially. لقد نقلنا الديون عبر 6 شركات وهمية. التعرض الفعلي 3 أضعاف ما يظهر في النشرة. We've moved the debt through 6 shell companies. The actual exposure is triple what the prospectus shows. Zainab was refilling water glasses. Her hand remained steady, but her mind was recording every word with the precision of her intelligence training. Mr. Khalil frowned. "Marcus, perhaps we should discuss—" لا أحد هنا يفهم. "No one here understands," Marcus interrupted in Arabic, gesturing dismissively at the surrounding tables and staff. He glanced at Zainab as she stepped back from the table. هذه؟ ربما تظن أننا نتحدث عن الطقس. يتم توظيفهم لأيديهم وليس لعقولهم. This one? She probably thinks we're discussing the weather. They're hired for their hands, not their minds. He continued, emboldened by wine and arrogance. بحلول الوقت الذي يدرك فيه أي شخص سنكون قد أعدنا التمويل بالفعل عبر هيكل جزر كايمان. By the time anyone realizes, we'll have already refinanced through the Cayman structure. Zainab cleared the appetizer plates, her face blank as porcelain, her heart beating with controlled fury. As the evening wore on, Marcus grew bolder. The investors were asking challenging questions about the deal's structure, and Marcus was feeling defensive. He needed to maintain control of the room, to remind everyone who held the power. So he turned his cruelty toward Zainab into a performance. "Excuse me," one of the Saudi investors said gently to Zainab in Arabic. هل يمكننا الحصول على المزيد من الخبز? Could we have more bread? Before Zainab could respond, Marcus interjected harshly. لا تضيع أدبك. هذه مثل الحمار، مفيدة لحمل الأشياء، ولكن لا تتوقع الفهم. لقد رأيت ذكاء أكثر في الأثاث. Don't waste your courtesy. This one is like a donkey, useful for carrying things, but don't expect understanding. I've seen more intelligence in the furniture. The Saudi investor looked uncomfortable. Marcus, that's not... أنا ببساطة أكون صادقاً. I'm simply being honest, Marcus continued, his voice dripping with condescension. انظروا إليها. ربما ترسل المال إلى قرية لم يروا فيها السباكة الداخلية أبداً. هؤلاء الناس يأتون إلى هنا بلا شيء، لا يفهمون شيئاً، لا يساهمون بأي قيمة. يوجدون لخدمة من هم أفضل منهم. Look at her. Probably sends money back to some village where they've never seen indoor plumbing. These people come here with nothing, understand nothing, contribute nothing of value. They exist to serve their betters. Zainab met his eyes for just a moment, one brief second, where something flickered in her gaze, before she lowered her head and walked to retrieve the bread. Mr. Khalil set down his fork. Marcus, I think you've had enough wine. Marcus laughed. انظر. يمكنني أن أتلو الشعر أو أعترف بالقتل ولن تعرف الفرق. You see, I could be reciting poetry or confessing to murder, and she wouldn't know the difference. The dinner was winding down. Dessert had been served, and Marcus was ordering after-dinner cognac. He was feeling triumphant. The investors seemed interested despite their earlier hesitation, and he'd successfully dominated the evening's dynamics. Then his phone buzzed. A message from his lawyer. SEC asking questions about Dubai project. Call me. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. He excused himself to take a call, stepping away from the table toward the restaurant's private corridor. Zainab was nearby, clearing a recently vacated table. Marcus didn't even register her presence as he spoke into his phone in rapid Arabic. اسمعني بعناية. هيئة الأوراق المالية لا تعرف شيئاً. إنهم يصطادون. لدينا الحسابات اللبنانية معزولة تماماً. لا يوجد أثر ورقي يربطها بالكيانات الأمريكية. المرأة التي تطرح الأسئلة المدققة يمكن التعامل معها. كل شخص لديه سعر أو نقطة ضغط. Listen to me carefully. The SEC knows nothing. They're fishing. We've got the Lebanese accounts completely isolated. There's no paper trail linking them to the American entities. The woman who's asking questions, the auditor, she can be managed. Everyone has a price or a pressure point. He paused, listening, his face reddening. لا يهمني إذا كان محفوفاً بالمخاطر. لقد بنيت هذه الإمبراطورية من خلال المخاطرة التي يتجنبها الرجال الأقل شأناً. الآن تعامل مع الأمر. أو سأجد شخصاً سيفعل. I don't care if it's risky. I've built this empire by taking risks that lesser men avoid. Now handle it, or I'll find someone who will. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, collecting himself. When he turned around, Zainab was there, quietly stacking plates onto her tray. Marcus looked at her directly. ما زلت تعملين بجد كما أرى. قولي لي، هل يحدث أي شيء في هذا الرأس؟ أم أنه مجرد مساحة فارغة بين الأذنين? Still working hard, I see. Tell me, does anything happen in that head of yours? Or is it just empty space between the ears? Zainab looked up at him, and this time she held his gaze. Something in her eyes made him pause. When Zainab spoke, her Arabic was flawless. Not the basic phrases of a casual learner, but the sophisticated, precise dialect of an educated professional. Her voice was calm, controlled, and devastating. سيد Thorne, أنا أفهم أكثر بكثير مما تتخيل. Mr. Thorne, I understand far more than you imagine. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Zainab continued, switching seamlessly between Arabic and English. على سبيل المثال، أفهم أنك وصفت للتو مخططاً للاحتيال في الأوراق المالية يتضمن شركات وهمية وتقييمات مزورة وعرقلة هيئة الأوراق المالية. For instance, I understand that you've just described a securities fraud scheme involving shell companies, falsified valuations, and SEC obstruction. You can't, Marcus stammered. أفهم أيضاً أنك أمضيت هذا المساء في إهانة شخصيتي بينما تعترف بجرائم تحمل عقوبة 20 عاماً في السجن. I also understand that you've spent this evening insulting my character while confessing to crimes that carry a 20-year prison sentence, she said, her tone never rising above professional courtesy. She gestured subtly toward a woman 3 tables away. That journalist has been recording audio all evening. I made sure she was seated within range when I saw you arrive with Middle Eastern investors. كنت محللة استخبارات عليا في بغداد سيد ثورن. الجرائم المالية كانت تخصصي. أتحدث 7 لغات. I was a senior intelligence analyst in Baghdad, Mr. Thorne. Financial crimes were my specialty. I speak 7 languages. She set down her tray with deliberate care. كنت على حق بشأن شيء واحد. أنا أخدمك الليلة. فقط ليس بالطريقة التي كنت تعتقدها. You were right about one thing. I am serving you tonight, just not the way you thought. Marcus's hands were shaking. This is entrapment. No, Mr. Thorne. You voluntarily confessed to multiple felonies. I simply understood the confession. Within 48 hours, Marcus Thorne's empire began its spectacular collapse. The journalist's exposé went viral, complete with authenticated audio recordings of Marcus speaking in Arabic. Every insult, every confession, meticulously translated and verified by linguistics experts. The SEC opened a formal investigation that same day. The Dubai investors pulled out immediately, triggering penalty clauses that drained Marcus's liquid capital. But it was Zainab's testimony that proved devastating. She'd spent those years as a waitress quietly observing, and she'd noticed things. The patterns of Marcus's meetings, the suspicious timing of certain transactions, the network of associates who cycled through the Oasis lounge. She'd kept meticulous notes, not with any plan for revenge, but because observation was her training, as natural as breathing. When federal investigators arrived at her small apartment, they found a former intelligence analyst who could walk them through money laundering structures with the expertise of a prosecutor. Zainab became their star witness, her credibility unimpeachable, her testimony precise and damning. Marcus Thorne was arrested 3 weeks later. The billionaire who'd walked into the Oasis lounge with such arrogance walked out of a federal courthouse in handcuffs. His assets were frozen, his companies dissolved, his reputation destroyed. The last time Zainab saw him was in court. As she prepared to testify, Marcus leaned toward his lawyer and whispered desperately in Arabic, "Kaif kan yajib an arif?" How was I supposed to know? From the witness stand, Zainab responded in perfect English, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "You were supposed to know, Mr. Thorne, that every person deserves respect, that cruelty has consequences, and that underestimating people, especially those who serve you, is the most expensive mistake a powerful man can make." She then delivered 4 hours of testimony, describing every Arabic insult, every confession, every moment of his arrogance. The jury didn't need translation. Zainab's intelligence training had prepared her to present evidence with devastating clarity. Justice, it turned out, spoke many languages, but it only needed one voice, hers, to bring a billionaire to his knees. Thank you for watching. This is Beyond the Scripted. Please subscribe, like, and share for more interesting stories.